right, students, welcome back. And we have Peter Schell back with us, and he promises his dog Ziggy is not going to bark this time. No promises. That may still happen. But we're going to shift from, before we talked about just what is overall internal audit, what is DeVita, where Peter runs the audit shop, what is their mission statement. Now we're going to talk about kind of stepping back even out of internal audit and talking big picture governance at an organization. And what does that look like? And so, Peter, I'm going to let you kind of take it away. And in your own terms, what do you see as governance? What are some of those components where you work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of governance just very simply. It's the means by which we get things done. And that process by how we define to get things done, how transparent is it, how well documented is it, how formal is it? And so a lot of times as we think about audit and where we can add value, it's how can we look at that process and make sure that it's sustainable, make sure that it's well understood, and make sure that people are adhering to those expectations. And so that's just kind of the general view of how we think about governance. And that extends all the way to the top at the board of directors down to, small projects and how projects are administered and executed.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point there. When I say the term governance, of course, I'm thinking of governance of the whole organization, but you're exactly right. Every department or even every little project that a company does has its own governance structure, which means it's kind of the backbone of making sure things, like you said, get done and get done well, really. So I look at things like, you mentioned boards, charters, policies, standards of conduct. Any other, well, you mentioned you worked on the ERM program. Obviously, that's a big part of governance as well. Any other pieces that you can think of that come to your mind?
I think within that, you define who your members of the project are, you define kind of the authority and the decision rights those people have. And you have to kind of stop every now and then in these projects, whether they're large scale governance or small, and ask, is that right? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right decision authority and definition of roles? And make sure that everyone has alignment and agreement, because those are the ways that you can then create processes that allow for those decisions to be made and progress to be made. So that's a lot of work that we do both as an audit and an advisory function. Audit in the sense of making sure that people are adhering to the governance practice, and advisory in the sense that we often help projects or large scale portfolios set up the right governance program to define those things, to make sure that they're being done in an effective and efficient way.
Yeah, so one of my questions I was going to ask you is, how in the world does internal audit or risk assurance and advisory, how do we get involved in governance? And so that would probably be your answer then, right? At multiple levels, assuring that the governance is there or helping put that into place. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit here. And, where do you see the line? A lot of people talk about independence when it comes to internal audit, and a lot of people shy away. And I'm talking about traditional internal auditors. And I know you and I are a lot alike in our thoughts on more helping our organizations improve and be better. Where do you see that line of independence in advising them on these governance policies? Like, how would you explain that to a student?
Yes, it is a little, it can be a little gray at times. And I think that the base advice I would offer is, if it feels like a conflict, it probably is. And then there are some more technical answers to that. How we draw the line within our team is we will offer advice that then management or our business partners make the decision with their eyes open, is how we talk about it. And so we may say in an advisory situation, best practice is X, or, here's how you could set this up so that there's no conflict of segregation of duties, or you want to make sure that somebody else is approving it. And so, but ultimately the business leader is responsible for the decision. And so I like to bring that information to them so that they can make that decision with their eyes open. And then kind of the more tactical way we do it is we make sure that anybody who's been part of an advisory team does not do the audit over which that advice was given. So we just literally separate it from the individuals who were involved in that advisory project.
That's a great way to do it, especially, you're obviously have the benefit of having a big enough team to have kind of two separate groups to do that. But I think that's an excellent description to give to the students. Well, is there anything else from a high level governance standpoint that you can think of that would help students understand, even as they go to work at organizations, maybe things to look out for, red flags, whether that's in leadership behaviors or, composition of the board. I try to think about those high level things where I know I read about frauds every day in the newspaper, and we want to keep our organizations off the front page of the paper. Any other things to look for when it comes to governance?
I think two things immediately come to mind is what is the incentive structure? Is it understood? Is it well documented? Are we incentivizing the right behaviors? Because even the best intentioned person can create unintentional incentives for people to, cheat on their statistics or flub their metrics a little bit because then they get a bigger bonus payout. So I think about that a lot. The second piece, kind of at the very highest level, is your board, is your leadership open to, feedback and, input on the appropriate tone. We are actually conducting for the first time this year a tone at the top project where we are evaluating management and the board's willingness to listen to and take the feedback that may not be exactly what they want to hear, and how management and the board responds to that. For me and my company, I'm proud to say that they're very open to it. Our CEO himself is encouraging this audit and actually wants us to do it quicker than we're ready to do it. And so I think that just creates the right environment so that the governance can be right, and we don't expect it to be perfect. But I do think that the folks are trying their best to do the right thing, and that speaks volumes to me.
Absolutely. I think there's a huge warning or red flag, I guess you could say, if leaders just want to put the earmuffs on, right? And they don't want to hear about the problems. They don't want to talk about the problems. And so I think that's such a great thing that you've been engaged to do that. Now, one of the things I tell students as a piece of advice is that they should be interviewing the companies they go work for as much as those companies are interviewing them. And I see you nodding, so yep, I think you agree with that. What other advice would you give to students as they go out into the business world? Or I always like to say, what advice would you have given young Peter back in the day that you wish somebody had told you? Anything?
Well, probably be a little more seriously in your 20s, a little bit more professional in your 20s. But I think your advice, I say this during our interview process, this is a two-way street. And I really appreciate folks who ask hard questions during that interview process. DaVita has a unique culture, and frankly, it's not for everyone. And I grew to really appreciate it, and I really enjoy it. But through my interview process, I asked a lot of questions about it because I found it so different and so unusual. And I think that led the hiring folks to know that I had done my research, to know that I wasn't challenging it, but I was curious about it. And then I was really invested in, my place. Do I fit? Is this the right place for me? And so I think that spoke volumes through my process. And I encourage folks, what is that hard question? What is that weird thing that you heard about DaVita that I'd love to talk to you about why it is this way? And so I would just encourage you to ask those questions. If it's on your mind, you don't want to find out in 6 months that this company or this job isn't for you. It's better to figure it out in the interview process. So challenge yourself to bring those questions to the interview.
Yeah, and I think this fits perfect with this topic of governance, because I do feel like a lot of those questions that you could ask are around the governance processes, because ultimately this is the backbone of your organization. Internal audit is a part of governance, or enterprise risk services. That's part of the governance structure that's in place. So it's really good that you ask some solid questions around what that looks like at the company you may work for.
Absolutely. And it gives you insight into who that company is and who they're trying to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Peter, for your insights on both internal audit overall and the overall governance at an organization. We appreciate you spending time with us.
Of course. Thank you.